Welcome back to the Isn't That Rich podcast. Today, the three of us are talking about a topic that's really important right now, and it's something that's happening more often than you think, and that is mail theft fraud. So, and not just any kind of mail, it's the checks that you're receiving and sending through the mail. So FinCEN, which is the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, recently released a report, and it reported 6 months of mail fraud from 2023, and the results were pretty eye-opening to us. So we wanted to make sure that our listeners were informed about what was going on with this mail check fraud, and hopefully we can prevent some of that from happening.
Jill made us laugh the other day because she was in her office just like, oh my gosh, do you guys know how much mail theft check fraud is going on right now? And we're like, no. Jill's like, I really care about this. I'm really passionate about this. And it is crazy the amount of money that has been stolen from people.
From people writing checks through the mail.
Right.
That's what mail check fraud is. It's so you send a bill or you send a payment for a bill or whatever you're paying through the mail. Mm-hmm. People are stealing that mail and then forging checks. Yeah. And so in that 6 month study that the FinCEN did, over $688 million were stolen out of the mail, which I think is just insane. And we'll get into that. But I want to talk about like what this report is based on first, and then we can kind of talk about like some of the details and what's going on.
Yeah.
So what banks do anytime there's suspicious activity is we have to file something called a BSA report, or it's called Bank Secrecy Act. So essentially any financial institution that has to follow this set of rules, and they have to file this report anytime they have this suspicious activity. They report things such as fraud, money laundering, or any other financial crimes that they see. And anytime they see this, they report and fill out this form. It's just a way to alert authorities of what's really going on, that something kind of shady is happening. So, yeah.
Yeah. So basically FinCEN ran a report. So they're basically looking for patterns and trends that are happening so they could indicate the fraud. And so they did a report on mail check related fraud. So they pulled together all the data from basically February to August of 2023. Okay. So in that time alone, there were 15,417 reports filed related to this type of fraud, which, like you said, which was over $688 million at risk, including both completed and attempted fraud. So that's just like a crazy, staggering number.
Yeah. And that's 6 months.
In
that's
just 6
only
months.
6 months.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Well, it started back in February 2023. And so the FinCEN, it's kind of a hard word to say, they alerted all of the banks because of this mail theft surge that's going on. And we have to send codes through BSA, and they had made a specific one called Fin 2023 mail theft when you're filing your reports, because it was that bad. And I think this is crazy because we talk a lot about digital fraud. And so it's very interesting that this like financial trend analysis is coming out, because, you know, we're just so focused sometimes on the digital that the fraudsters are kind of going back to old ways, and now they're doing mail theft fraud.
Well, and you don't even think there's that many, because I personally don't write a lot of checks anymore. No. I just don't. It's not something I do. And so to hear that this much fraud just from check being written and sent through the mail, that's so much money.
Yeah. So today we are wanting to kind of explain just this process to help the public, businesses, and financial institutions know what's going on, because it's going on.
Yeah.
And it's increasing by like an alarming rate.
It is so fast. And that was last year.
Yeah.
So it's so crazy.
And we see it at the bank.
Can I just say, this is another thing that I found while researching it, that an average, the BSA report for mail theft related, like the actual average for each, how do I say this? Like each time it was reported was over $44,000. So every time the average was, so every time a check was the average.
That's
I mean, I couldn't imagine getting like a $50 check frauded from me. Like I would be so upset. So to imagine like the average amount is $44,000, that's literally so crazy. High. That's crazy.
So let's talk about how we got here, because it didn't just happen all of a sudden. Why is there this huge surge of check mail fraud? So if you think back to COVID, it really spiked during COVID time. So you think about between March of 2020 and February of 2021, when we're in the thick of things, the United States Postal Inspection Service received over 299,000 mail theft complaints. So that was a surge between that time, year over year. That's 161% increase than compared to the year before.
So 300,000 mail theft complaints.
Just during the COVID times, from 2020 to 2021.
Yeah. So the problem kept growing, and the USPS, they reported over 38,000 high volume mail theft incidents between October 2021 and October 2022. That was in 1 year. Now, in the first half of the fiscal year of 2023, they saw another 25,000 incidents. So look at that growth. It's insane, of mail being stolen from places. Now, it wasn't just mail being stolen out of like mailboxes. There were 412 mail carriers that were robbed while on the job. And this was that within that year. And then 305 mail carriers were robbed on just that first half of the fiscal year in 2023.
Can you imagine?
So the alarming rate of these robberies happening is just insane.
It's not safe to be a mail carrier.
No,
Protect our mailman.
And you think of those
which
like
makes sense when we went to, and there, you know, she was like, you know, there's a high risk being a mail person, you know.
Yeah. So you guys went to
the post office, and she was like, "No, this is actually like a serious
give
job."
me a
And
dangerous
I was like,
job.
No, it's not.
It's like, what
But
do you
it
mean?
is.
I just give you my mail. It's not. She's like, no, this is a high risk job, and it really is.
That's crazy. And if you just want to be walking around, passing out mail, doing a good job in the community, and you're
shout out to Dave, my mailman. He is the nicest human on the planet. He's like something from a movie. I love my mail carrier. Anyway,
The poor mail carriers.
just want to protect him at all costs.
They don't just have like dog treats in their pockets, like being scared of like walking to like a dog attack. Now they're worried about everything else, right?
So if you think about COVID, obviously you can associate it with financial assistance. And so everybody and their mother was getting a check in the mail.
Yeah.
Unemployment checks, the relief checks, everything. And so scammers saw that as an opportunity to rob people pretty much. And so that's kind of where the spike came from. And so when they got these checks, they would maybe alter them, or they would counterfeit them, or they would sign them fraudulently and cash them.
This isn't a minor issue anymore. I just feel like it's getting to be such a huge issue. In 2022, FinCEN received over 680,000 reports on check fraud. So we talked about that already, but that was in 2022, and then it increased again in that 6 months in 2023, which is the report. So that nearly doubled year over year too.
Little over doubled. 680 compared to about 300,000. That's
right. Insane.
That's wild.
Now we're in 2024. And so we don't have the numbers obviously for this year, but you can only imagine how much it's increased from this study that came out that was just reported. Like the analysis was just reported this past month in September, how much it's gone up in 2024. And despite all the efforts from financial institutions and law enforcement, mail theft fraud remains a growing problem. So Jared, why don't you tell us a little bit more about like the key findings of the report?
Right. So not all of these criminals are operating on the same level. There's some that are not so skilled. There's some that are very skilled. So some people are just marking out the name.
White out.
White out.
For real though. They really are doing the white out.
And then some are like developing this like special chemical that's like removing ink, and then they're like writing whatever they want. So it's crazy. So Jill, talk about a little bit of some of the unsophisticated methods.
Yeah. So some of the unsophisticated methods, the first one is just fraudulently endorsing a check. So you sign the back, the wrong name, and the bank gives you the cash without like verifying. So they still check, sign their name on the back, and try to deposit like it's theirs. No changes, no fancy altering. So it's just signing the check. Another one is altering the payee or the amount. So you cross out the name, write the name, or like white out right? So cross out the original payee's name and add their own or change the amount on the check. And then the third not so sophisticated method is third-party payment. So a third-party payment is, instead of altering the check, some criminals will make it look like the rightful payee signed the check over to them. Now, I've never seen this happen, or like somebody signing a check over, but I think it's something when checks were super common that people did. It was like, oh, I'll sign my check over to you and you can deposit it for yourself.
Yeah.
So those are the three like not so sophisticated methods.
I wonder how much they work. Like if people are catching them, surely I would be like, oh, you crossed this name out. I'm not as sure about this. Especially if they did the whiteout maybe.
But people are ballsy. Like they'll go into a bank and do this stuff. And we see it all the time. And thankfully we have really diligent tellers that stop people. But you wouldn't imagine the stuff that comes across the teller line.
You try it, you're going to get caught. So then there are some moderately sophisticated methods. I'm going to go over those. So like I said earlier, one of those is check washing, where they take a stolen check and treat it with this special chemical that removes the ink. Once the ink's gone, then they can write whatever they want on the check.
Oh my gosh. I think of like cash washing money. Like you think of all of the Ozark comes to mind, where they're like washing the money, buying different entities and like trying to clean the money. This check washing is different, but yeah.
This is like actual check washing, I think.
Going through it.
And so then another one, and we kind of talked about this in another episode of like selling on the dark web, but they'll take a stolen check and they'll sell the information on the check on the dark web.
That's scary.
So
you know what else I bet you could get on the dark web? The chemicals to wash the check.
There's probably like giving people ideas. There's like a criminal starter pack for, I'm sure, somewhere. But anyway, so then another one is so, cut that out.
No, keep that in. That's funny.
So then another one would be creating counterfeit checks. So they steal a check and then they, through great graphic design or whatever, try to mimic the check, doing it that way. That definitely takes a lot more skill involved. And then another one would be stealing blank checks. So if, you've ordered a new checkbook, they may steal your blank checkbook, and to them that is an absolute gold mine, because now they can just write so many checks.
Didn't you say that happened to Tom?
So Tom left his checkbook in his car, and he took his car to the detailing shop.
Oh my gosh.
And it was in Harrisburg somewhere. I don't think they're still in business now, but literally they stole a check and would
try to cash it at our bank.
Yeah, they brought it. Yeah, so they had blank checks, and and they're like, no, you're not Tom Franks, or
that's crazy.
You don't look like the owner.
But they would, write out checks to whomever and try to cash them.
Wow.
Crazy.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
So guys, on to some more sophisticated frauds, some more sophisticated methods. These are usually part of organized schemes or organized crimes. This is like super serious business. And the first one is new account fraud. And so people will flat out open up a new bank account with stolen identities. We have seen that before at the bank. Larger scams. So sometimes mail theft related check fraud is part of a bigger scam, like a romance or employment scam. And so basically the scammer convinces the victim to cash a check on their behalf and send the money elsewhere, making the victim unknowingly act as a money mule. We've been talking about these money mules a lot lately, and I think we're going to talk a little bit about it more, but money mules, interesting.
Well, when we had, there's a different episode we did not so long ago when, like the elderly, when you take advantage, when they're taking care of the elder abuse and that kind of thing, they would, unbeknownst to them, be a money mule. And
they're basically funding a bigger operation that is illegal.
A lot of these romance scams are saying, send me money. Well, they'll deposit a small amount into that. And then they'll say, well, and then they'll have them transfer it out. And it's actually going for sex trafficking or something crazy like that for other really terrible crimes.
Schemes.
And they're just part of the puzzle now. So
it's awful.
And then lastly, insider involvement. And I think this is so interesting, but it does happen. So the most sophisticated criminals sometimes even get help from the inside. So they will be maybe an employee of USPS or even the bank. something like that. And then in one instance, a postal worker stole over $1.6 million in checks and deposited them into his own account. Obviously, this is a story now that we're talking about, so they did get caught. But
yes, it was in the report, actually, the person that, so they were inside this report. But during that 6 months, one of the postal workers got busted for that much money.
That is crazy.
Yeah. I'm thinking, woo. They were tired of getting the check stolen from them, so they started stealing.
Oh my gosh. You're gonna get caught.
Alrighty, so the Illinois and the nationwide impact. So mail fraud is not just happening in big cities or certain states. Illinois is actually one of the top states for this kind of fraud. Wow. So you think like California, Washington, like these bigger cities, but actually Illinois is ranked 5th in terms of check fraud.
Wow.
Why?
I don't know.
I don't know. Everyone does talk about how bad our state is, but like these are some of the reasons why. Like, why is our check fraud this bad?
So high.
Yeah. It's terrible. So it's not just, these bigger cities. It's definitely something that's happening in local rural areas like our own. So it's not just like you should just be like, oh, I live in a small town. Like check fraud's not going to happen to me. Like it is happening more than it is in bigger cities.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So true. And how are they going undetected? This is what I don't get is like, how are they not being caught? And I mean, a lot of these criminals are just completely avoiding human contact. So they might go to an ATM and, put in a fake check. You can deposit checks into an ATM in some places, or you can do remote capture. So you can deposit that way. And I'm not giving you ideas either, but like, that's what they're doing is they're not having that human contact with the tellers or with the bank itself. So it's all this digital world, like you mentioned before, where it's taking place.
Yes.
Another heartbreaking tactic is something called smurfing, or using that money mule, which we already mentioned. It's essentially where financial criminals will take advantage of people in vulnerable situations. So maybe an unhoused person will be hired to do their dirty work. So this person will go into the bank, this is how it works. So the fraudster will hire this vulnerable person. That person will go into a bank or financial institution.
And they do the dirty work.
And they do the dirty work. So
in hopes that they'll maybe just get like a small portion of the pay.
Like a small payment, yeah.
And like they'll be parked down the street or somewhere and make them walk. And they don't really even know what they're doing. And then
all of a sudden they're in Quinn's office and they're like, why am I in trouble?
They get caught. And, our tellers are so like good about like catching it, like calling the police. But then, the unhoused person is going to get arrested, but they're like, it's still hard to catch the actual criminal that's like bribing these people to do it, which is so sad because he's like they're taking advantage of these like super vulnerable people that just like are wanting money. But we're on to you.
Yeah,
we're on to you.
I feel like a lot of times they're long gone. The real criminal masterminds or the fraudsters are long gone before. Like
it's sad. It's awful.
Something really sad is they're already in this vulnerable situation. They might be desperate for that money. And so they'll go do this, and the criminals just take advantage of that desperation and they go down for it, take the fall.
Yep. So really the impact doesn't go beyond just the person whose check got stolen. It affects the whole financial system because a lot of times the bank, upfronts the money or covers that money. And then we have to create fees and policies that, to protect our customers more, to cover that, which is just a lot. And then, think about it as a business owner, someone's stole your information, has stolen money out of your account. Now you can't pay your employees, you can't pay your vendors, can't pay your loan, it snowballs into this like huge problem. It's awful.
I think it's crazy that, we have to as a bank, put these policies in place because that our customers might not love to deal with. Like the stricter policies, I know with checks, we might have to call the actual account or the payee of the check and say, hey, did you write a check to so-and-so and verify that check over a phone call without. And so say it's a legit check that person wrote, this business owner wrote this check, and now they're going to have to get a call every single time and say, yes, I did write that check. And then think about that person, the payor was who I talked about previously, but now the person standing in front of the teller waiting for that money might not be able to get cash that check that day because maybe the bank couldn't get a hold of the payer.
Right.
You know, it just all of this, it's this ripple effect. It's more inconvenient for the payer. It's more inconvenient for the people that are cashing the checks. It's just
right. Because if you're someone in your business that writes a lot of checks and then constantly you're getting a phone call from the bank, I mean, like, great. But it's like what you said, if you're not available to answer the phone or you're just like so tired of it, like, yes, I wrote the check. Yes, I wrote the check. Like that's a lot of communication.
right.
With the bank.
Right. And now we're seeing all this technology fraud. So the bank's not going to text you, hey, did you write this check? Like it has to be a legit phone call, right? Like there's just so many facets to this that we're getting into. Sad. So now that we've covered like how this check fraud is happening, how this mail check fraud is happening, let's talk about how you can protect yourself or steps people can take to protect themselves. And there are a lot of simple things that people can do to avoid encountering check fraud.
Yeah. I would say the first thing to do in online banking, e-banking department will always tell you this, always just check your accounts. Like log into it every day, check your bank statement, make sure everything on there is correct and nothing has been taken out of your account that looks suspicious, because the faster you can get onto something, the faster you can solve the fraud. Because once things get away, I think about Brad, how he was like, you know, when I had some fraudulent activity, I wish I just would have acted even faster. And so constantly reviewing those accounts is a big thing. Another great thing, I'm kind of pivoting to businesses. This is a new product that we've adopted at the bank. It's called Positive Pay. And we actually talked about it on episode 33, but Positive Pay in a nutshell is basically just a way for businesses to upload checks that they've already written. And so it's basically like double verification about checks. And so it goes into our system. We know that when someone goes to cash this check or deposit this check, the person has written it, or the business has actually written it. And so it's kind of just an automated fraud detection service that makes sure these checks are written to the right people and the right people are cashing or depositing them.
Yeah. I think it's kind of cool because when the check is actually presented, so say you wrote me a check, Ashley, and I go to present this check to get it cashed or put it in my savings deposit, you will get an alert on your bank account, and you'll have to say yes or no, I did clear that check. Please clear that check, or no, don't clear that check.
Right. So I think about check washing, and I think if I sent Jared a check and someone got a hold of my check and washed it and then tried to cash that specific one or deposit it, then the bank would alert me. Did you do a $50,000 check to Jill? No, I did not.
I did not.
No.
Decline. Call the cops.
Decline. Arrest her immediately.
Yeah.
That's good. Another tip is really be aware of any unexplained debits. So, you know, a lot of these criminals, they're not just like taking huge amounts out all at once. They're taking like very small amounts. So you can kind of notice that like, oh man, this little like $1.50 came out of my account and this seems unrecognized. That could be like a first sign of that. So making sure, like Ashley said, you're looking at your accounts every single day. You're being aware of any like unexplained, debits. Another thing, if you run a business, you should consider like internal controls. So the person writing the checks should not be the same person reviewing your bank statements. So just making sure that you have good systems in place and accountability in that way is super important.
Yeah. You feel like you should be able to trust your employees, but people get desperate and you just never know. So it's always good to have that dual verification. So if you write the checks, you're not looking at the bank statements. That's good.
Yeah.
One thing that I always do when I write a check is fill in all the blank spaces. So don't leave any margin for somebody so say a check is written out to me and there's space after my name. You can't put and. So say it's Jill Franks and Ashley McVicker. There's no space to write a second name, or there's no space to write the amount on a check. So say I say $300 and don't fill out the rest of it, and you can't come in and say $375 and change the check in that way. So fill in all the blank space, write as much detail on the check as you can about who it goes to, because that's going to be
a good
harder
tip.
for somebody to use those chemicals and wash that check or write and change the check.
Okay, next one. Get rid of your old checkbooks. Shred them, burn them, do something with them, because people are stealing old checks and are using them to fraud people. So safeguard your checks. I mean, keep an eye on them. Know where they are. I know for me, sometimes I'm like, I don't know where my checkbook is, and I find it, and you really should like be keeping them all in the same place or shredding them.
Or in a safe. That's what Tom and I have started to do is, we don't leave checkbooks sitting around anymore just because of his car incident. Like we're not going to leave them in our car. We're not going to leave them in a cupboard or in several different places. We're keeping them on the lockdown because you just never know who, because we have people come to our house all the time that, Terminex or people working on our house outside, the landscaper. You just don't know who's coming in, and we just want to have it protected no matter what.
Right. That's good. For businesses, it's really crucial to vet employees to have authority to write checks and processing incoming payments, all those kinds of things, like we were saying earlier. And don't forget about securing signature stamps and any automatic check signing equipment. These tools need to be tightly controlled to avoid fraud. And a lot of, I think we see this a lot happening where maybe there is an employee who is doing these things. You really need to trust, have a system where you can trust certain employees with that and don't trust everyone with it.
Yeah, for sure. One of the best things is to not write checks at all.
Wow.
I'm going there, but there are so many other ways to pay people that are more secure. I know, just with us, even, customers just really, if I could take checks away tomorrow, I would say, let's do it. Let's not have any checks.
Right. Wonder, is this something that's are we gonna keep doing checks? I don't know. I don't know how far in the future, but you see fraudulent activity on checks and in the digital world. So
yeah.
It's I don't know. I don't know what the answer is.
There's a lot of businesses that will want you to write a check. The person who mows my lawn wants me to write a check. Originally they wanted me to put it in an envelope in the mailbox and they'll just come get it. And I'm I'm not comfortable doing that. I need to give it to you because I just don't want this check sitting in my mailbox.
That's a great segue into my next tip, Jared. So if you are mailing out a check, definitely just go to the post office and mail it that way, because of the mail theft. People obviously are going through the mailboxes. And so if you have a fresh check waiting in there, it is more susceptible to fraud. And so taking your checks to the post office.
Yeah, giving it to actual person or in that secure instead of just the blue mailboxes on the street is even more secure,
And you have to just cross your fingers that this mailman that you're taking it to is not
they're not writing your checks.
Not the one depositing the 1.6 million into his account. But
and I think of all the different ways we can pay now. And just to go back to what I was touching on before, you can do P2P, person to person payments. There's Venmo, there's you can wire things so much faster. We have this tool called Auto Books. So for businesses that are accepting a lot of payments, I feel like it's a really good way to accept payments digitally. Like your lawnmower. Yeah. If he had Auto Books, you could literally tap your phone and pay him on the spot instead of leaving, or he could send you a link.
Email invoice.
Yeah. And it could go directly in his bank account rather than a check floating around and then taking 3 days to clear. And there's just easier ways out there to pay people than checks.
And I think, business owners that are so used to getting paid that way, I think they feel like something like Autobooks would be intimidating. It really isn't. It's actually a lot easier than trying to schedule times to pick up check and all this kinds of stuff. They really should look into it.
Yeah, it's so simple. You set it up once and then you can create line items. So say mowing lawn is $100. You just add that to your invoice, shoot it out, and it's done. It's so simple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
well, I even to piggyback off that, I think there is more of a quote paper trail with our digital stuff, because you're getting online receipts. You can clearly get an email if you Venmo'd someone or P2P'd them and paid them. Sometimes if you send a check and then it cashed and then so-and-so says, well, I never got your check. Well, it says, yes, you did. It cleared out of my account. Well, how do I know you're not the one that cashed it or it wasn't a criminal?
Right.
So
Right.
it's more direct sometimes when you're doing digital.
Yep. So yeah, following all these steps can really keep you a lot safer. And, you know, we're sharing these statistics because clearly this like number is growing at an insane rapid rate. There really needs to be some kind of reform, but there are ways that you can really keep yourself safe if you have to write a check.
Yeah. I mean, really what we just hope this episode got across was that mail check fraud is a thing. We're seeing it here locally all the time.
All the
It's a
time.
real thing. So we just want you guys to protect yourselves. And there are ways to do that if you take the time to do it. We've mentioned a few tools. We hope you start using them to their advantage, and let's just make check fraud a thing of the past. I mean, really.
Let's just stop it right now.
Stop.
Vote for us. Put us in office. Stop check fraud. No, I think this has been great. Stay vigilant.
Yes.
About your finances is my message I would like to get across today.
Definitely.
Keep an eye on stuff and use safer methods. And I just don't think I don't think they're it anymore.
I agree. And if you have questions, reach out to your bank. And if you feel like you may have fallen or someone stole a check or something like that, I mean, act immediately. Don't not wait around for it. But yeah, we really hope this episode is helpful. If you like it, please subscribe. And we'll be sharing more financial tips.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you next week.
So Jill, where do we go from here?
Be sure to check out our show notes for this episode, and also be sure to follow us on social media and subscribe to our newsletter. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.